Swamiji, all of our San Diego family and those who have come from outside of San Diego. It's such a wonderful, wonderful joy to be back here this evening, and particularly at this church, which is our first time at this church. Last night we had a little satsang at home, and someone was asking about crime and violence in the world, and as we discussed it, the topic shifted to the idea of people who were deeply unhappy themselves being the ones to make other people unhappy, and how people who are deeply happy personally tend not to wake up in the morning and figure out ways to make the lives of other people hell. So, as the satsang went on, the gentleman had asked a question about happiness and where does it come from and how can we have it. And at that point we had gotten just to Puja Swamiji's silence time, and he observed silence every day from 10 at night to 10 in the morning. And he said, okay. He said, we will take this up tomorrow evening in the satsang. So we'll start by talking about happiness and joy and where does it come from? What is it? And I want to share a joke which I love about this with you all, which is a joke of a man who goes to see a psychiatrist, and he comes to the psychiatrist and he says, my doctor has told me to come see you. So the psychiatrist says, okay, well, so tell me what's the problem? And the man says, well, there isn't really a problem. And the psychiatrist says, well, tell me some more. How's your career? And the man says, well, actually, my career is great. I mean, it has, ups and downs like everybody's does. But in general, I'm very peaceful with it, and I enjoy it. I feel fulfilled. And the psychiatrist says, well, then tell me about your family life. I'm looking for something. What is the issue? And he says, well, tell me about your family life. And the man says, well, my family, of course, we also have ups and downs, but actually we really love each other. We're very deeply bonded and connected and joyful. And the psychiatrist says, well, what about your inner life? And the man says, that too really is going very well. I mean, again, of course, I'm human, I have ups and downs, but in general, I'm really deeply grateful and happy and joyful and peaceful. And the psychiatrist is scribbling frantically on his pad. And finally he looks up at the man and he says, and how long have you been like this? And I love the story because being happy is so unusual that we don't know what to do about it. If the man had said to the psychiatrist, well, God, I'm a stressed mess, the psychiatrist would have known exactly what to do. But I'm happy, I'm joyful, things are good and grounded and connected. We don't know what to do about that because it's so unusual. Feeling deeply happy. Not, as we always say, happy just because, you've had an ice cream cone and it made you happy, or you watched a movie and it made you happy. But deeply happy is something that is so far from most of our actual realities. And the reason for that is something that I refer to as trying to squeeze orange juice out of a cow. Cows are wonderful. They give us milk. Milk, assuming it's organic and that the cows are treated nicely and lovingly is a wonderful, nourishing drink. Nourishes us, nurtures us. And orange juice is also wonderful, but it doesn't come out of a cow's udders. And the more we squeeze those udders, thinking that if we just squeeze hard enough, if we just say the right orange juice mantras and do the right orange juice prayers and play the right orange juice CDs and, fill our homes with orange incense, somehow we're going to be able to actually squeeze orange juice out of these cow udders. And that's what's happening in our lives. We're looking for happiness, for joy, for peace, for meaning, for fulfillment. But we're looking around us. We're looking in something that's just yet to be gotten. And so we talk about being closer and closer to happiness, searching for happiness, being on a path of happiness, learning about happiness, moving toward happiness, moving toward joy. And the problem with that is that the sheer concept of it ensures that we're actually never going to be happy. You can't move closer to happiness. You can't go out for happiness. It is something which can only be experienced in this moment. You can't be happy tomorrow or yesterday. If we're thinking about tomorrow or yesterday, we're not present in the moment. And real happiness and real joy can only exist in being present in the moment. And so no matter what we think is between us and joy, another $1 million, 10 pounds on or off, a divorce, the right spouse, the right job, as long as there's something between us and happiness, we ensure that we will never, ever, ever have it. Because even when we actually attain that extra $1 million or lose those 10 pounds or have the divorce and get the new spouse, we've created such a nature, an inner environment of lack and scarcity and misery that no matter what we get, who we are is miserable. And it no longer matters what we have. Our whole sense of self has become rooted in misery, in lack, in scarcity. When I had been in India for just a year or two, I conducted this scientific experiment. I'm a scientist by heart, by love, by joy. And I conducted a little scientific experiment in which I had come back to America briefly to visit. And what I had seen in India was so transformative and so incredible. People who had nothing, but were filled with such joy and such happiness and such peace, compared to where I had been born and raised, where we had everything, but as Puja Swamiji says, everything was set, but we were upset. And so my experiment was to see, is my intuition about how happy these people in India are, compared to how unhappy people here with everything are. Is this intuition right? And before I go into my scientific study, I just want to quickly clarify, it's not that having things makes us unhappy. Joy and prosperity can very easily coexist. They're not mutually exclusive by any means. Joy is a magnet for prosperity. The problem comes when we are believing that in that prosperity, in that extra million, in that 10 pounds, in this, in that, is where my joy is going to come. That's where the problem comes. That's where we're squeezing orange juice out of the cow, relentlessly and futilely. So the study that I did was I had come back and I spoke to about 10 or 12 different people I knew, all of whom were close enough to me not to realize that I was conducting a scientific study. And I checked in with them, how are you, how's everything? And each of them was at the pinnacle of their own individual realm or sphere. Their individual sphere. So, a tenured professor from Stanford, a Hollywood actress, a singer who had a song in the top 10, a billionaire CEO of a top company. And in talking to them all, I asked them one question. I mean, we chatted for a long time, but my scientific study was one question. And that question was, are you happy? And what I got was, I will be happy when, fill in the blank, doesn't matter, the kids grow up and move out of the house, I get another promotion, I lose this weight, or I would be happy if my mother-in-law were nicer to me, my boss were nicer to me, my employees were nicer to me, I lived closer to where I work, whatever. People at their absolute pinnacle were still one thing away from happiness. And it's not our fault. We are indoctrinated, heavily indoctrinated to believe that things outside of us are actually what's going to bring joy and happiness in our life. That's what the whole media and marketing and commercialization and advertising culture is all about. The example that I love to share about this is, if you look, for example, at a commercial for soap. Well, what does soap do? Cleans us. So an honest commercial for soap would say, this brand of soap cleans us better than that brand of soap. This brand of soap removes X number of, milliliters per million of bacteria compared to this brand of soap that removes only this much. But they don't. What do commercials for soap look like? A beautiful woman, and she's singing in the shower as she lathers up first thing in the morning. And her equally beautiful husband walks into the bathroom, and he's also singing, and they go out of the bathroom into the kitchen, and their child has miraculously gotten himself out of bed and dressed himself and done his homework and eaten his breakfast, and hand in hand they walk out the door. Nobody says, oh, Mom, you smell so fresh, or oh, Dad, you smell so great, or oh, that dirty face from last night is no longer so obvious. We're not talking about cleanliness. We're selling happiness. And the ultimate message to all of us is, if you don't feel like singing in the shower in the morning, or if your spouse doesn't come into the bathroom singing in the shower in the morning, or you don't have a spouse, or you have to drag your kid out of bed and force him to eat his breakfast, and force him to get dressed, and force him to do his homework, or you don't have a child, well, if you just change your brand of soap, everything will be okay. And that's what we're being indoctrinated to believe. So it's not our fault that we're searching outside. But it takes us nowhere. Mahatma Gandhi said it so beautifully. He said, what's the point of running so fast when we're running in the wrong direction? And we're running and running and running in this direction, inventing more and more and more things that actually are filling our closets, filling our shelves, but not bringing us what we're looking for. And then we invent more and more technology that's going to make our lives easier, that's going to bring us great relief. And of course, that just brings us more stress. I was sharing the other night that I had been on a plane recently, in the magazine in the airplane. they've got, all of these puzzles and games and stuff in the back of the magazine. And this one had a vocabulary test in it. And in the vocabulary test, they gave a word. And then there was a multiple choice question of what's the meaning of this word? And it's a real word, new words in the English language dictionary. And you have to guess what is the definition of this new word. And the word was nomophobia. With a background in psychology, I figured, okay, so we have a phobia, it's a fear, it's a debilitating fear, a handicapping fear. Fear of what? And of course, the makers of the quiz were very smart because every single one of the questions was, one of the answers was fear of this, fear of that, fear of this. So there was no way to guess. And when I flipped over the page to see what the answer was, it was fear of being without a working mobile phone. This is not a joke. This is actually true. You actually now can go in and be diagnosed with a handicapping fear of your mobile running out of batteries, being unavailable, having been left at home. So we're acquiring more, obtaining more, buying more, inventing more. But our fears are keeping up. Our dissatisfaction, our dis-ease is keeping up with it. We have to keep inventing newer and newer illnesses to keep up with the things that we're inventing to make our lives better. So where does happiness really come from? The bad news is it doesn't come from all of those things that we are told it comes from. But the good news is it's actually our nature. Look at babies. What makes babies happy? Your jingling keys, a raisin, their own toes. Right? What do babies need? They're just as happy with your keys as, a brand new piece of technology. It doesn't matter what it is. It should move a little, it should have a little bell, make some noise. So our nature is happiness. Our nature is pure joy. What happens? Well, as the ego develops, which is actually a very necessary thing to happen in the field of child development, as the ego develops, we develop what we call the mind and the thoughts. And those thoughts tend to be things that actually end up ruining our lives. The thoughts are what lead to misery. One of my closest and dearest friends and heroes, our Dr. Bruce Lipton, has written books and teaches all over the world about the peril of our own thoughts and how to change them. So our thoughts are what lead to the desires, the fears, the expectations, the greed, the anger, and the identity that says, I am a victim of this, I'm a victim of that, this is my history, this is what's wrong with me, I'm the one who always gets the short end of the stick, I'm the stupid one, I'm the fat one, I'm the failure one. Or the one who says, I deserve everything, I deserve better, who the hell are you not to treat me like the queen of the universe? And as the ego develops and the mind and the thoughts develop, so does the misery. There was a sign outside of a church that I saw as we were driving, actually in the East Coast in America. You know how the churches have these wonderful signs in their lawn? And the sign said, watch your thoughts and you will see the future. Watch your thoughts and you will see the future. Now, Perhaps they were talking simply about the difference between attaining salvation or damnation. But it's more than that. Maybe they realized how deep it was. Watch your thoughts and you will see the future. It's not just salvation and damnation. And it's not just the future. It's actually right here, right now. And when we talk about our thoughts creating our reality, it sounds very wishy-washy. I know that. It sounds very new agey. It sounds like we're saying, close your eyes, meditate on a mound of money, and when you open your eyes, there will be a mound of money in front of you. And if there isn't, it just means you're not meditating hard enough. You're not doing the right meditation. You don't have the right mantra. What I'm talking about, though, is actually hard science. It's not wishy-washy, new agey stuff. Science is now showing us that actually our thoughts are what create not just our future, but our actual present reality. So they've done all kinds of studies. There's a whole field of psychoneuroimmunology that talks about the connection between our mind, our thoughts, our physical body, our immune systems, and our reality. They've done studies, for example, you take something as simple and as physical as pain. I burn myself, I burn my hand hurts. The pain is in my hand. I twist my ankle, my leg hurts. Nothing I can do about it, has nothing to do with my thoughts. Or so we think. More than 50% of people who have actually had a limb amputated continue to experience pain in the limb that's been removed. This is amazing. More than half of people who no longer have the paining, ailing limb actually still feel pain in that limb. Where's the pain? If I burn my hand so badly that I actually have to have it amputated, and now I still feel the pain in my hand, where's the pain? They've done studies where they've taken people and people who have never played the piano, and they've sat them in front of a piano, and half of them, well, all of them, they show someone playing a song on the piano. Simple song. They show it to all of them. Then to half of the group, they give 2 hours a day to actually come and sit in front of a piano and keep practicing the piano. The other half of the group is never allowed to actually touch the piano. But 2 hours a day, they have to spend with their eyes closed, imagining that they're playing that song on the piano. 2 weeks later, they bring them back together. And what they have found is that both groups perform almost identically. So in the group where they never actually practiced, where their fingers never actually touched the keyboard, what was practicing? What was playing the piano? Duke University did a wonderful study a few years ago where they had done this longitudinal study of thousands and thousands of people, and they had watched them for 10 years, measuring everything about how these people live. What they eat, do they drink alcohol, do they smoke, what their exercise habits are, everything about them. They were testing for many, many, many different aspects of life. At the end of the study, in addition to all of the other things they found one thing that I love and touched me very deeply, which was that people who regularly attend a place of worship, doesn't matter what their religion is, doesn't matter if it's a church, a synagogue, a mosque, a gurdwara, who regularly attend a place of worship, were 25% less likely to die of any cause during the study. And this was true even when they held constant diet and smoking. It wasn't that preachers were coming up and saying, stop smoking, eat organics, eat your vegetables, exercise. When they held all of that constant, people who regularly attended the place of worship, beyond anything else they did, were 25% less likely to die. Then they thought, well, it's the social network. People who belonged to a tennis club had no such benefit. And here's the key. It wasn't enough to be a member. You couldn't just actually pay your membership dues and not show up. You had to actually show up. So what's going on here? Where's the link between my faith, my beliefs, my mind, and something as purely physical? We're not even talking about just perception now. We're talking about actually my reality that I've created. This starts to get us into really where the answer lies. Because then what we realize is the answer is about changing our thoughts, not so much about changing the world. I read a wonderful quotation a few weeks ago. Somebody had sent it in a mass email. And every once in a while you get something great in one of those, and this was one of them. And the quotation was, if you are miserable, sitting in a room alone, you can be pretty sure that you are the cause. If you are miserable, sitting in a room alone, you can be pretty sure that you are the cause. And I love that, because of course it sounds so obvious, but how many of us haven't sulked in a room convinced that someone else was the cause? And suddenly it makes us realize, wow, what have I taken with me into that room? Well, only my own thoughts, only my own mind. And that brings us into the awareness of where the challenge is and where the answer lies. Because we can actually change our mind. When I was studying neurology 20 years ago, they told us the brain can't change. Once you've reached late adolescence, once the brain has myelinized, it's over. The best you can do is, put people on medicine. You can't change the brain. Now we know that actually everything we do changes our brain. If I take these two fingers and tie them together for a week, my brain will change accordingly. If I'm used to wearing shoes and I go barefoot for a week, my brain will change accordingly. Bruce has done all kinds of research on ways through hypnosis of changing the brain. Meditation changes our brain. There's all sorts of research studies now showing how just the act of meditation, mindfulness meditation, mantra-based meditation, doesn't matter what type you do, changes our brain. So now we start to realize that's the answer. It's about an inner change. And that brings me to my other favorite joke, which is of a man who goes to the doctor, not a psychiatrist, but actually the doctor this time. And he says to the doctor, "Doctor, there's something very wrong. Everything in my body hurts. Whatever I touch, it hurts. I touch my head, it hurts. I touch my back, it hurts. I touch my knees, they hurt. I touch my stomach, it hurts." So the doctor's really surprised, because typically people have one complaint. He runs every test, he runs every scan. And at the end, he calls the man in and he says, "Well, I have some good news and I have some bad news. The good news is there's nothing wrong with your head or your back or your stomach. The bad news is your finger's broken. Because your finger's broken, whatever you touch, it hurts." whatever we touch, it hurts. We get some temporary reprieve, we have a good movie, we have a good chocolate ice cream cone, we have a nice temporary experience somewhere, we go on vacation, but our lives hurt. And what is that connection? That connection is to the depths, the true self of who we are. We don't know who we are, and that's where the misery lies. We're looking for an identity, and so we create an identity out of the external world around us. Our professions, our physical bodies. I'm a doctor, I'm beautiful, I'm rich, I'm poor, I'm this, I'm that. On our histories, where we've gone, what we've learned, what's happened to us, what hasn't happened to us that should have happened to us. But those identities are fleeting. And in most cases, they trap us. And they lead to more and more misery. In Indian culture, there's a beautiful mantra that says, Purnamada Purnamidam Purna Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. And it means that, capital T, that, is whole and complete and perfect and divine. This, capital T, this, which we've pulled out of that, is whole and complete and perfect and divine. So that, the Creator, God, whatever name, whatever form, whatever our religion is, it doesn't matter. Every religion says God is infinite. When you pull anything out of infinity, what do you get? Infinity, right? We learn in grade school, what's infinity divided by 10? Infinity. Infinity minus 200, infinity. Infinity divided by 7 billion, infinity. So capital T, this, is also infinite. And pure, and whole, and complete, and divine. And that's the identity. When I first met Puja Swamiji, he held up, we'll say this mic is a pen, he held up a pen, and he said to me, "You are not this pen." And I laughed, right? I mean, obviously, of course, I'm not the pen. And he said to me, "You know, you laugh because you know you're not the pen. But someday, when I tell you you are not this body, when I tell you you are not that history, when I tell you you are not all of the things that you identify as, you will laugh just as much." Mm-hmm. It will be as inconceivable to think that you are those as it is today to think that you are not this pen. But for most of us, we're so busy identifying with all of these little things around us, so focused on what our mind is telling us, what our thoughts are telling us, what we don't have, the scarcity, the lack, where my identity fits here, what my expectations are. That we miss the big picture. They did, and I'll conclude here, they did another one of my favorite psychological studies where they took students, college students, and they put them in front of a video. And they told them that the game was to watch this basketball game. And you had one team in white and one team in red. And just to count how many baskets each team made. And the students did that. It's not rocket science. And at the end, they asked the students, okay, how many baskets did the white team make? How many baskets did the red team make? And they all got the number mostly right. And then the scientist said to them, did you notice anything else? And this was actually what the study was about. And well over half of them said no. And now here's what had happened. Halfway through the 6-minute basketball game, in the middle of the screen, an enormous gorilla had actually come out, center stage, center court, and had danced in the middle of the basketball court for 30 full seconds, and then waltzed off. young, healthy college students? Because they were so focused on what they thought the task at hand was, which was counting baskets, that they missed that which was so obvious. And that's where the misery in our life comes from. We're so focused on what we think the task at hand is. Attain this, attain that. Reach here, get this, look like that, become this. That we miss the most obvious truth of who we are, which is born, full, whole, complete, divine. And when we have that experience, something magical happens, which is that who we are, the very self that we are, expands into its capital S, self. And that is what we're looking for. We shop to feel expansive. We eat to feel expansive. But of course, none of it works. That experience of melting and merging and losing the borders and boundaries of the self. That's what happens in love. Bruce and I were just on the way here in the car talking about how love is the key. Real love. And it doesn't matter whether it's love for a spouse, a child, God with a name, without a name, love for the tree in your backyard, love for the universe, because it all eventually becomes one. If you experience that real love for even one of those, it miraculously becomes love for everything. Because what love does is melts us. Look at the words we use to talk about it. We talk about melting and merging and swimming and oceans and bathing and volcanoes and fireworks. They're words of losing ourselves. And that, well, losing our lowercase s self and melting into the capital S self. And that's what we're looking for. And that is what's found in the inner work. And so then suddenly our lives and every minute and every moment becomes a practice of yoga, of meditation, of love. So we begin with happiness, we end with love. And that, I think, if we can take some of that out with us into the world, not only does it become joy and happiness and love that we feel, but that's what then touches everyone around us. And slowly, 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 that's what actually changes the world. And until and unless we've been given a magic wand to wave over the world and change it miraculously, this is the tool in our hands. And the great part about it is not only does it change the world, but it feels so wonderful as you're doing it, as you're